Hey everyone, this is Steve Schmid with Simple Pump Company. Today what I want to do is I want to show you how to uninstall the hand pump. So we'll walk through all the steps of how you get the hand pump out. The reasons for that are you may want to maintenance it, maybe you have to have your electric pump replaced and you need to remove it for that purpose. But whatever the purpose may be, today you'll know how to fully remove your hand pump from the well. All right, so the tools that you're going to need for this process. You're going to need a crescent wrench. You're going to need your safety tool because you're going to want to make sure your pipe is secure. You'll need a 3/16 Allen wrench, a 1/4 Allen, a couple of channel lock pliers, and potentially, depending on the version that you have, some vice grips to disconnect the rods. We now have flats on the rod ends, so usually you can use a crescent wrench or a 5/16 wrench to do that. The system here I know is older, so it doesn't have those flats, so we'll be using those today. What I like to do is I like to set up a clean space because when you're removing this, right, you're bringing it out of the well and you want to try and avoid any kind of contaminants so that when you put it back in the well after the maintenance is complete or your submersible is replaced, that it's clean. And I actually have a bucket of water with a solution of bleach in it, just in case something drops or something looks like it needs to be cleaned. Okay, so our prep is ready. So now let's get to removing the pump. The first step that you're going to want to take is to remove the handle. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the 1/4 bolts that are holding the handle bracket on. Now when I remove this third bolt, what's going to happen is the rod should drop a little ways, and that's because the piston is actually dropping onto the bottom of the cylinder, and usually this will have a load on it, this last bolt, so you may want to just pull up on right here like I'm doing with my right hand here, just to take that load off, so it's easier to get that bolt out. But then you'll notice, see that drop? That's totally normal and what's expected. So then I take those 4 bolts and put them to the side. You're going to take your crescent wrench and you're going to loosen the pump rod from the clevis. Now remember, these are left-hand threads, so we're going to go clockwise to loosen. What you can do is use the leverage of the handle to break that loose. All right, so now that's loose. You should be able to unthread it from the pump rod. A little awkward to turn it, but eventually you'll get to the end there. All right, so now that handle assembly is apart. We can go put that over on our table. All right, the next step, we're actually going to pull our pump head assembly up. And this is where you're going to start needing your safety tool because you're going to put that underneath the coupling on the first pipe. This next step is quite often done in reverse than it should be done. So we're going to go through that right now. And this is loosening the split flange that's actually holding this. So what you want to do is you want to, when you're removing the pump, you want to loosen the 3 bolts on top first, so that you have control over loosening the split, the actual pinch bolt, which is on the side, because you're going to loosen that and pull up on that once it's loose, because you don't want this to drop down. And that does bring me to a point. Typically, you're going to want to do this with another person. We always suggest that if you are doing it yourself and not using a well professional, that you use a partner to do it. I've obviously done a ton of these, and this set is pretty shallow. I think it's only 7 or 8 drop pipe kits. So it's fairly light and it's easier to handle. But when you're doing it, always have someone to help you, at least one person. Or obviously, if you're not comfortable doing this kind of thing, then call up a well professional. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen these 3 bolts first with our 1/4 inch Allen. They don't need to be taken out all the way, they just need to be loosened. You're going to want to keep your split flange in because that's where the safety tool sits when you're pulling your system, when you're pulling the different sections of pipe out. Okay, the 3 on top are loose. Now I've got to be prepared to handle some weight. So what I'm going to do is grab here, and then I'm going to start to loosen that pinch bolt. Oh, as you can see, it kind of dropped right down. So now I should be able to wiggle it a little bit and pull up. And I'm going to get it to where, oops, it is. This is again why we usually have people help us, because things like this can happen. But we're going to lift up to our pipe. Man, I can't seem to hold on to this thing today. Put it in location, and now we're secure. So you can walk away and not worry about anything dropping or getting to a position that you don't want it to be in. All right, so the next step is we're going to disconnect the pump head assembly from the first pipe. So that's going to require 2 of our pliers. So we're going to grab those. Sometimes if it's been sitting for a while, you may need to use pipe wrenches on this step. Really depends on how tight it was originally. Now all this stuff moving forward is just standard threads, so you're gonna do your standard directions for tightening and loosening. Get these set to the right size. Alright, so we're just gonna watch your head on that nipple there. Alright, now we've got it loose. You know, these are tapered threads, right? So once you get it loose, it's fairly straightforward to take it off. It's not going to stay tight for a long period of time. All right, well, you can tell I had just used it, so there was water left in there, and with the check valve it hadn't wept down very quickly. All right, so I'm going to set that to the side. And next we'll need to remove the pump rod. So you can see there's a rod extender on this one, which has got a little flat on it. So there we go. Hold that. Pull that to the side. All right, now we are at the spot where we will start to remove our drop pipe kits. Of course, there are rod guides in here. They can sometimes be tricky to get out. Usually I just use the Allen wrench because it can fit kind of in that gap. So we'll pull that out and put that to the side. Okay, the next step, now we're gonna pull the first drop pipe up and put the coupling for the following drop pipe safely on that safety tool. Right, this is why we have usually someone helping out, because there's not much to grab onto. You can see the weep hole right there is now letting that water out. Okay, up above here, got our safety tool down. So our first just under 9-foot piece is there and ready to be taken off. Now, as you can see, the weep hole is still coming out, letting the water out. Now, this is a great example as to why we remove the plug on the check valve and gauge kit when we're using the pump in wintertime, because I had used it before we did the started this uninstallation. So there was water up above that weep hole, and it stayed there because that check valve does not allow a vacuum for it to come out. So this will keep going, which means when we unhook all of our pipe from this point forward, because the check valve at the bottom works correctly, every time I take a pipe out, it's gonna spit a bunch of water out. So this can be a bit messy, but that's just water. All right. Change this one a little bit. Okay, I've got it close. Here's where I like to be a little patient so it doesn't make too big of a mess. You can see the water's gonna start coming out here soon. All right, so that connection. And you're just gonna pull it up and over. And don't let this kind of fly back, but as you can see, this is a yellow rod. So this is an older version of our drop pipe kits. Same type of stainless end, same material. We just went to a different end type with the flats and changed the color to blue at that point. So now we've got to remove the rod ends, and what you want to do is I'm going to go ahead and use these vice grips just so I don't have to keep changing the size on the wrenches that we have there. So you're just gonna, these are normal threads. This system hasn't been uninstalled in a while, so they're relatively tight. So we may need to use the actual vice grip and get it tight. Now you want to make sure that you're grabbing right next to the joint, because these are actually hollow for most of the length, and what you don't want to do is crush this further down, because it could break the bond between the rod and the rod end. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get this unthreaded. We've got it loose now. All right, so what I like to do is just put this right back in the pipe that I just took out so it doesn't get dirty and we don't lose them. Also want to make sure that you don't let these rod ends get exposed to too much sun and heat, because the temperature in your well is, well, the water is typically in the 50s. And if you have it sitting out in the hot sun, that metal expands. Then you drop it right into the water, and then that allows that bond with the epoxy to disconnect, and can sometimes cause the ends to fail. So always make sure that you're keeping those ends out of the sun when you're doing your installation. All right, got our little rod guide here. Go ahead and pull that off. We'll now lift up the next pipe. Okay, we're secure. So this process, it really depends on how many drop pipe kits you have, but you'll repeat this process over and over again until you get to the last pipe. And we'll just pull this up and over, try and control that rod. It's coming back so it doesn't get too wild on you. Some people use needle nose pliers or a screwdriver to get these out. Whatever's the easiest for you. All right, so now we're down to our final drop pipe. The bottom of this is going to be our pumping cylinder. So once we pull this up, we're going to no longer use our safety tool, and we're going to pull the pump cylinder up through here. Now, this is a 125, so it will be able to come through here. You can see the cylinder here. If it's a 100, it'll also be able to come through. If you're uninstalling a 200, you're going to have a section of this size material on the top of the 200. And what you're going to notice is it's going to stop about right there, and you won't be able to pull it up any further. To uninstall a 200, the well cap's going to have to come off. So what you do is you pull up to this point and then you tighten the pinch bolt, this one right here. Don't tighten these three, just tighten the pinch bolt on the split flange. Okay, and then once that is tightened, you actually don't need to use a wrench on the bottom part. All you do is use a wrench on the pipe to take the pipe off. And then what you'll do after that is you'll remove the well cap, and then you'll be able to remove the pump cylinder and then do your maintenance or whatever you're planning to do. So since this is a 125, what you're going to do is just work it, because you got an O-ring in there, you're going to work it until it comes out. And now we're out. So we're going to put this over here with the rest of our stuff. One thing I do want to note is that you want to set that first drop pipe, the top drop pipe, to the side because you want to make sure that you put it in last when you reinstall your system. One thing that, and it's good that this has that, this is that you can see what looks like rust. So this is actually not the stainless steel rusting. What it is, you know, this sits in the well and it rests against the casing. So this is actually just residue from the steel casing. If you have PVC pipe as your casing, you won't have this same thing. But you can see this is all just residual rust that comes from that casing because it's cast iron and it's got water in it, so it's gonna rust. Okay. All right, so your hand pump is uninstalled. Now you can either remove your well cap and replace your submersible if that's what needs to be done, or now you have your pump system out, and if you need to change your seals or change something else or maintenance something else in the system, you're prepared to do it. Thank you very much for your time today. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.